Welcome to another episode of our Learning from AI Leaders. Dinesh and Mohammed with you. We are the co-founders of Rapid AI for Learning, and we're very pleased to have the leader of AI for education leaders, Professor Danny Liu, on the call. Welcome, Danny. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
That's a very generous description. One of the many learners of AI in education. So I'm a molecular biologist originally. So I trained in plant, cell, and molecular biology. I did a bit of teaching at Sydney University after my PhD, after I discovered that I just hated research and science. Um, Didn't have any of it, and then got kind of bitten by the teaching bug, and then moved into academic development afterwards, which is kind of, the old adage, if those who can't do teach, well, I'm the ones who can't teach teachers. So I teach academics how to improve their learning and teaching, mostly through edtech, and that kind of led me into the AI space.
Mm,
And
mm.
you're very modest, Danny, but you have really emerged as a leading voice for AI in education in Australia and globally as well. How would you describe this journey?
Ooh, um, I have a lot of uncertainty around, are we taking the university? Are we taking our the other universities that adopt our practices in the right direction? And so I think the journey has been good, but filled with uncertainty and doubt.
Is that more within the Australian context, Danny, or globally, or both?
I think it's a bit of both. I think people around the world will probably see Australia as a nation ahead of the game in terms of AI in education. And what we're doing at the University of Sydney probably is, in the upper quartile of that movement.
Mm, mm.
But I think there is just generally a lot of uncertainty globally around AI in education because
Mm,
of multiple factors, how fast it's moving, the kind of various pressures that higher education is facing globally, and those kind of things.
mm. But it's
And
also
is
quite nascent as well, right? So that's maybe part of the dynamic that leads to many of us believing that, about that sense of uncertainty and not you sort of knowing what the next steps are, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
I think it is partly because of the newness of it. Partly it's also because of the rapidity of advancement. Partly it's
Mm,
because it really challenges the way that we've done things for such a long time. And all of that makes human beings necessarily uncomfortable.
yeah. It's very, very confronting for sure.
And Danny, I
And
just had a question for you about that we've seen some research come through from KPMG and the University of Melbourne on attitudes in Australia to AI, and we sort of see that Australia is certainly sort of lagging behind the rest of the world in terms, well, certainly in terms of optimism to AI, being much more skeptical, and lower levels of AI literacy. I'm just wondering whether you're finding a different narrative in the higher education space that you're working in to sort of, I guess, those general attitudes that we're seeing in the Australian populace at the moment.
Hmm. I saw the headlines of the report. I haven't actually read it, so I don't know what their methodology is and what their population is as part of their research. But I think, at least in terms of institutional responses and maturity around AI in education, I think Australia is further ahead at least the higher education level. I can't speak to K-12 and the general community because I don't really operate as much in those spaces, but I think in terms of how universities and colleges are approaching it here, I think we are a bit more ahead.
mm. And when you found initially, Danny, that you had an interest in AI for education, uh, what sort of response did you get from your institution, the University of Sydney, in terms of support, or perhaps maybe resistance?
Hmm. I think we've been quite fortunate at the University of Sydney because we have a pro vice chancellor, a deputy vice chancellor, a vice chancellor, and also a chancellor who are all very connected and realistic about what this means for the university, for our students, for our educators, and also for society at large. They've been all amazingly supportive, and even the all the staff and the students who we work with, I think at Sydney have been. Um, cognizant of the risks and the challenges around it, but also accepting of the reality and the way that we need to move forward with this. So it's been quite a nice environment to work in for this.
Can I ask the question, what's your main message right now to education?
My message for education leaders, I think, is to support the people working with you to experiment in safe ways, and to trust that they are able to do that. I think the unhelpful thing for education leaders to do is to over-impose restrictions on exploration, because I think given the technology is moving so rapidly, it's so unknown, it's so uncertain right now, the more experimentation from the grassroots that we can support and encourage and share, the better it is.
Sometimes people talk about low stakes and high stakes. Would you sort of agree that we should be experimenting with the low stakes stuff, and what would that look like?
People would say education generally is high stakes because education affects students' futures, and if nothing else is a high stakes, I don't know what is. And so, in a way, everything that we do is high stakes. Maybe instead of seeing things as high stakes, low stakes, because that's very subjective. Another way to think about it is just what kinds of principles or guardrails can we put in place to enable safe experimentation. And so that could be something as simple as, what you should and shouldn't put into the AI, or what kinds of AI should you or should not use, should you not use, and the reasoning behind that as well. So I think instead of getting people to figure out what is low and high stakes, it's more kind of giving those principles to operate under.
Have you got an example, Danny, of where that has worked well in terms of an institution, giving, I guess, agency to, academic practitioners, and, what sort of guardrails did they set up for those practitioners to make sure that there's some, safe experimentation?
So I'll use Sydney Uni as an example. So our guardrails are primarily about what you should and shouldn't be putting into the AI. So we have data security classifications, for example, around public, protected, and highly protected data, and we say, well, for the ChatGPTs and the Claudes and those kind of things, use them, sure, but don't put in any, protected or highly protected data. Put in things which are openly available, and that's really helped, I think, the university community accept the reality of these tools being available generally, and not being able to actually stop or ban or restrict these tools, but also giving people a bit of guidance around, well, everything we do should be safe. This is how to be safe with AI.
What's the best way, do you think, to communicate that message to the broader education sector?
To communicate with the broader education sector, I'd say people need to make some mistakes. People need to be educated in how to use these tools, what these tools do, and those kind of things. But people still need to make little mistakes along the way, which is how we learn how to use any kind of major society transforming technology like the internet. People make mistakes all the time in terms of how they safely use the internet or not. AI will be very much the same thing as well.
And I guess a bit like driving a car as well, or riding a bike.
Yes, yeah, those are slightly more regulatable, because you can not give people a license, but you can't not give people an AI license. People just use it anyway.
Yeah. Do you think we should be giving AI licenses to people?
No, I don't think so. It's one of those general purpose technologies, and it's so available that it's impossible to police any licensing. And so what we need to do instead is focus on education, focus on motivation, focus on just letting people know what is a safe and productive way to use it.
One of the things you talk about a lot, Danny, is using the traffic light assessment system for AI, which gives some sort of guidelines or parameters for students in terms of how they should be using AI, and it's about, like what you're saying, it's about encouraging the use of AI, but doing it in a sort of responsible way, but also knowing when it's not appropriate to use AI. And you've been critical of different approaches. Can you elaborate on how the system works in relation to assessments?
So I don't like the traffic light approach, actually. I
Mm.
quite think it provides an illusion of control and enforcement. So I'm very staunchly against the traffic light approach to thinking
Mm.
about AI use. I feel it's unhelpful because it makes people think that there is control where there's not. And when people implement systems like traffic lights or assessment scales, they may have a false sense of security around what it actually means for things like assessment security, academic integrity, and assessment design as well.
Mhm.
So the approach that we're taking at Sydney, and which a number of institutions have adopted, is one that says, assessments will fall into maybe two categories. One is secure, one is the opposite, which doesn't necessarily mean insecure. It just means not secure. Open, we call it at Sydney. And the idea behind that is that for the open assessments, you have students using AI. We can't restrict or detect or ban or deny their use of AI. And so in the open assessment, it is an acceptance of reality that our role as educators is not to police the use of AI, but rather to teach students, model for them how AI can be used well. Okay, not using traffic lights, using a different kind of analogy, but that's kind of in the open assessments. And then on the flip side, we still need to, as educational institutions, confirm that students have the capabilities we say they do. And so we need secure assessments through which to measure that.
Mhm.
And Danny, is that a case of embedding AI into assessment, or sort of embedding the use of AI into assessment and then asking the student to critique it and to reflect on it? And I note that you've created like an assessment menu approach, which is fascinating in itself. Can you tell our listeners about what that entails?
So instead of thinking about it in terms of embedding AI into assessment, I think we need to think about it in terms of learning outcomes. What is it that we want students to develop, and what do we want to measure in terms of student capability? We always need to start with that, what the learning outcomes are. And so it's about having a look at the learning outcomes that we currently have in our units and our courses, thinking to ourselves, are they still relevant in this day and age and also into the future? And then thinking about then how do we teach students so that they can develop those capabilities, but also how do we measure the attainment of those capabilities as well? Now, the teaching and the development of those capabilities probably would come through general teaching activities and learning activities, but also comes through those open assessments where basically you have students completing assessments and us acknowledging the fact that they're going to be using AI. And so our role in those assessments is to say, well, we're not going to force you to use AI, but we know that AI is out there, that you're probably going to be using it, that your employers will be expecting you to know how to use AI. So our role as teachers is to help you connect the dots. It's to say, for these assessments, we will help you identify the more useful, healthy ways to use AI that will actually support your learning and also support your growth as a person who's AI literate. And through that, be able to essentially engage them with AI.
Danny, how have you been to manage that imperative to redesign assessments, but at the same time comply with the institutional regulations or sort of policies, but also the regulators' requirements, in this case, TEXA?
So fundamentally, institutions need to follow the Higher Education Standards Framework. And the Higher Education Standards Framework is a very good piece of legislation, which says, amongst other things, that at the course level, which means degree usually, institutions need to be able to confirm that students have met the learning outcomes of that course.
Mm-hmm.
And those learning outcomes need to be evaluated or assessed at either the unit or the course level. And so what we're I guess hanging our development work on really is that piece of legislation to say that, well, we need to make sure that students who walk across the graduation stage have those capabilities that we say they have. And so the redesign and compliance piece actually fit hand in hand, because to me, the higher education standard framework and what we're trying to do in universities is we're trying to bring value to our students and the community. And the value that we bring through our degree programs, or our award programs, is one of integrity, but also one of relevance. And the integrity angle is, I guess, would be established through secure assessments, measuring that students have those capabilities. And the relevance angle would be established through the learning activities they do with us and also the open assessments they do, because through those activities, they would be developing the relevant contemporary capabilities that a graduate would need.
In terms of your own experience, what sort of barriers have you had to overcome? And how did you balance, I guess, your passion for AI in education and AI innovation for learning, while at the same time, complying with the regulatory requirements, as well as, I guess, your own institutional policies?
Oh. So I think, again, it comes down to the idea of value. That value for an institution comes from the integrity of their degrees as well as the relevance of their degrees. And those two elements of value need to sit hand in hand. They can't be separated. Like if you have integrity but no relevance, then students won't come to you because they won't be learning workforce ready skills. If you have relevance but no integrity, then employers won't hire your students because they won't know anything for real. And so you need to have both relevance and integrity hand in hand. And so I think that is where the balance comes. It's recognizing that simultaneously we need to confirm and develop and confirm in students their capabilities, and those capabilities need to be contemporary and relevant to the society and workforce that students are going to be entering. And so that's kind of where AI speaks into it, because AI can support now the development of those capabilities, but also some of those capabilities will be AI based as well.
I guess the challenge that's involved in terms of staying relevant and making sure that we prepare students for these sort of contemporary and fast changing tasks. How do you sort of approach that, and how do you advise others to do that?
I struggle, I have to admit. Every morning I open up LinkedIn, open up Twitter, which is not great anymore, but at least LinkedIn, and news and those kind of things. And I spend a certain amount of time reading and staying up to date, but it is increasingly difficult, and there is an increasing flood of information coming through that it's like drinking from 10 fire hoses, and every day another fire hose gets added to the mix.
Yes.
But it is really hard. I guess the way to do it is that you just do it. You talk to people like yourselves. You talk to others who are kind of keeping their ears to the ground, and you talk and share with people.
Yeah. And in terms of, I guess, your own, outlook or vision, Danny, what would you like to see happen or transpire in terms of AI for education?
It's a very deep question.
We're very deep people.
No, it's really good. I can see that your questions are very meaningful. I think I would like. I have 8.5-year-old kids, and I honestly don't know what the next 10 years is going to look like for them in their educational journey up to adulthood. And it makes me quite, I have to say, makes me quite nervous, perhaps, and unsure of what we should be doing. But I think what is fundamental to education are human relationships. And it's education at any level. It's education between a parent and a child. It's education between a lecturer and their students, between a teacher and their class. It's about human relationships. So I think what I would love to see in this kind of AI in education future is a rediscovery of the importance of human relationships, and a situation where we have AI being able to support and enable those as opposed to take away from those.
I mean, we hear about AI companions and AI tutors. There's a product in China at the moment. It's rolled out in Singapore, and it's basically a little robot a school student can put on their desk, and you can key in any question you want, and it spits out answers for like $10 a month. And we all, I was also reading recently the main use cases for AI. Companionship was right up there. It wasn't about finding answers for homework. It was about friendship. So is there room for that in the AI future that you've seen?
I think we have to make room. I think as people who are more experienced in life versus our kids and our students, we have to be the ones to direct the future towards a future that we want them to live in and study and learn in. The AI companions thing is really interesting. I think the reality of the situation is that that's going to happen. But, like I was saying, we need to take control as much as we can of the future, knowing full well that we can't control everything. But there are things that we can leverage AI for that don't necessarily replace that human relationship. I mean, I'll give you a very simple example. Every teacher is sick of answering emails from their students, or answering the most fundamental of questions. And so, if a teacher's energy levels are reduced because they are spending time on those things, then maybe one approach to using AI might be to partner with the teacher so the AI can handle some of the more lower level questions. I'm not saying boring questions, but just lower level questions. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
Where do
About
I
the
get
content.
started with this question? What's this really basic idea that we should have known about, or that I should have known about coming into this class? So it's not just the mundane, boring stuff. It's actually that kind of slightly lower level stuff that doesn't necessarily need the human touch. And then that means when the students come and see the teacher in class, the teacher is not as de-energized, and then can actually spend that time in class face to face with the student, building those human relationships.
And I think, as you mentioned there, Danny, about the de-energized teachers, we see quite a lot of narratives on LinkedIn and other sort of platforms where teachers complain about the amount of sort of police work that they have to do as a result of sort of trying to catch people using AI, and they don't enjoy it, and it's not good for anybody. And I know that you've mentioned about this whole premise, which resonates with us, around looking for learning rather than cheating. Can you sort of talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so that look for learning, not for cheating, actually came from Kath Ellis, who I really hold in high regard in this space. So when teachers have a view of controlling AI use, or restricting or banning or detecting AI use, those are all policing terms. And our role as teachers is not to police, it's to teach. And so what we should do and focus on in education as teachers is really we should have assessments which we can design such that they are able to detect learning, and for everything else, focus on actually developing learning as opposed to trying to be police.
Yeah.
And those assessments that will actually help us detect learning are going to be those secure assessments, which is why I strongly feel the two-lane approach is quite a decent way forward, because it's one of those things that kind of structurally acknowledges and separates says that you need to have a way to structurally design your assessment such that they are able to tell you the capabilities of the students. And for everything else, you want to be supporting the students in learning, and probably alongside with AI as well.
And it's interesting you say that as well, because Sinead Bovell, who's one of the sort of futurist and strategic AI thinking leaders in Canada, she came up with something which I thought was interesting. And she said there's got to be times and moments where AI is not used. So she talked about sort of allowing it in certain ways. It could be to use ChatGPT to critique it or whatever it is. But then she said, the next day when they come into class, they shouldn't be using AI. They should be presenting back to the class, which I thought was a very interesting idea. But I saw other educators challenging that and saying, again, it's a form of policing, and you can't stop them from using it, and you'll end up not being able to do that. And I'm just wondering, can we still put up these guardrails? Do we still have the control to do that? And obviously, you talked about us having an imperative in some ways to sort of lead this change.
I think part of it is around the language we use. So possibly an unhelpful thing to say to your students is, in this class, you cannot use AI. Because if I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant, what have you thought about?
Pink elephant.
And you say this to me, they're like, why not? I'm going to use it now that you mentioned it.
Yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
before, but now I am. And so
Yeah.
maybe the language we use is not about that kind of control language, but agency language. And so you, as a teacher, what I would do is I would say, yes, I know you can open up ChatGPT now and give and get it to answer all the questions I'll give you in class, but the reason why I'm doing this for you today in this way is X, Y, Z. And it's really helpful if you learn in these ways because X, Y, Z. Part of it is because you have a secure assessment coming up where you actually need to demonstrate your learning that you have learned. But also part of it is that, struggle is important. And we're all in this together in class and we want to spend this time, learning about your human opinion. And so if you give students the why, it gives them the agency to decide for themselves.
What do you think about this approach, which is an approach I use in my own teaching within the higher education space, where I say to my students, I want you to check the answer on ChatGPT. And I get this, well, often students laugh because they think I'm joking. And I say, no, I want you to prompt ChatGPT and I want you to find the answer. But then I want you to look at me, don't look at your screen after you've read the response or the answer that you've got. And I want you to tell me what you think the answer is and how you feel about that answer. Is that a good micro place to start in terms of facilitating and acknowledging that we are using ChatGPT, that students are using it and it's okay to use it? Would this be okay, do you think?
So my question to you as an educator would be, what is your motivation for that activity?
My motivation is to let them know that I know you're using ChatGPT. So if you're going to use it, let's use it openly and let's have a dialogue about how you're using it and what you're finding and how what's the process you're using to synthesize that information that you found.
Yeah, and I think that is a fantastic motivation. I have heard teachers do similar things, and their motivation is to convince students that AI is wrong all the time and is useless. And that secondary one is the wrong motivation. But I think your motivation is perfectly fine. What we don't want to do for students is we don't want to introduce a fear or an unhealthy aversion to AI, because we do need to engage them in it.
Well, often you find students when they walk in, they'll open up all the usual apps, whether it's the university learning management system and other applications. And ChatGPT is just one of those applications that automatically loads on their computer when they start their class. You can see them using it. So I guess in my approach, it's I just want to make it clear to them I'm not against you using AI, but I am concerned about how you use it. So again, let's have a bit of a dialogue about it. So I'm interested in their content and in their the curriculum side of things, but I'm also interested in their practices around how they integrate AI into their learning.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfectly good way to see it. 2 years ago, when we were talking to students, even then, they were saying, oh yeah, AI is just another tab on a browser. We refer to it sometimes, we don't refer to it some other times. And they're learning how to use it as a additional support mechanism to get through the day. And what we need to do as teachers, just like you do in your classes, is to kind of acknowledge that it's there and then help them to know how to engage with it well.
Danny, in Australia, under work health and safety regulation, we have this idea of a duty of care. So whether you're a visitor to a workplace or an employee or a manager, everyone has some responsibility, based on a hierarchy type of system. Do you think that framework is compatible with AI, that we all should have, well, AI for education anyway, but we should all have some duty of care, whether we are a student or an academic or a manager?
I think we have a duty to each other as citizens in society and as human beings to help each other grow as people. There are good ways to use tools and there are bad ways to use tools, which will, make people grow well and make people not grow well. And I think AI is just another one of these things that, it's more transformative than your usual tool, yes, but it's another tool that humans will be living alongside and using. And so we do have a duty of care to each other to help us engage with it more. If you saw your boss, that's going the other way. If you saw your boss use AI in an unscrupulous way, not checking its outputs, or using it like Google instead of using it like a brain, you would say, oh, that's not quite the way you should use it. Let me show you. So
Yeah.
it goes every way.
And one last question, Danny. What AI for education project are you working on currently?
A few. So one of the big ones that Sydney's working on now is the assessment remapping and redesign project. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to move about 25 or 30,000 assessments into the two-lane system. And so gradually working with academics through the different faculties on moving those tens of thousands of assessments over.
Wow, sounds like a great challenge. And what, you've got other things that you're working on as well in the space?
So another one that's taking a lot of my time is the Cogniti project as well, and that's where we have a platform where teachers can build their own AIs and also allow students to build their own AIs as well. And the whole idea behind that is that it builds trust, I think, between teachers and students and AI, because a teacher can say to a student, I care about your learning and I care about you. I know that I can't get to each and every one of you 24/7, one-to-one, but I now have the AI, which I have built to allow me to help you better because I care about you and your learning. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do with the Cogniti project.
And are you finding that gives teachers more time with other elements of sort of deeper learning or sort of deeper engagement with the students, or?
I think it does. So some of the reports that we're getting through are talking about how, for example, students send 16 times more messages to the AI than they do to the discussion board. And what they're seeing in the discussion board now is that they're seeing deeper questions than before. And so it's kind of fulfilling the idea of the AI is acting as your partner and also the student's partner to cover off the things that are maybe slightly less valuable for a human to do. And that way, when the human comes into the mix, they can do the more valuable things.
Amazing.
And just one final question, if that's okay, Danny. With those initiatives that you're working on, and this is a completely unbiased question, but do you feel that there is scope or a need or room for training, some sort of structured methodical training to help in that trend, help academics or I guess the project workers in the transition to this new system, or are they picking up these skills as they go along?
It's a good question. I think I would say it depends. There are a whole range of different people. Some people who are very happy to get in there and just have a poke around. That's whether they learn these new technologies better just by having a go. Some people like a bit more structure in terms of maybe some examples or exemplars to follow, and some people to talk to. And some people prefer the full-on training course where they say, just sit me down for an hour and tell me what to do, and then through that whole. So it's the whole gamut, really.
We can help you with that.
That's what they can call
it.
Just saying.
Thank you so much, Professor Danny Liu, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you on our program.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Danny. It's been really great learning from you.
Thanks so much.